Alright guys, so for a little while I've been tossing around the idea of doing a video overview of all my attachments that I use with my garden tractors. I don't own tractors just to have them. I use them for all different kinds of tasks around here and around the neighborhood. So I've been, over the years, in the 7 or 8 years I've been in this hobby, I've been collecting a lot of attachments to go along with my tractors, and my collection isn't, anything to really be proud of, at least compared to some of the collectors that I know, but I realize I've never actually done a video showing all of my attachments at once, and the collection's always changing, so I figured I would give you guys a little overview of everything right now as of summer 2020. So I guess we'll start off back here in this corner of the garage. This is like my attachment storage area. So the first thing you'll notice is my pair of John Deere Model 80 dump carts. I've actually had 3 of these carts. The first one I bought about 4 years ago at a swap meet. I ran that for about a year and then sold it when I picked up the second one that you see here. I bought this one off of a local collector who I've gotten to be pretty friendly with. He just wanted to get it out of his yard, and it's a 1978 model, judging by the serial number tag there. This is a later Model 80 cart. These were made from 1964 to 1987 or 88, so they had a pretty long production run. The early Model 80 carts had a brass serial number tag. Then they switched to an aluminum, or it might have been a steel riveted serial number tag, and then the later ones in the 70s and 80s had a printed tag, of the little tag like that you see there. I've gotten a lot of good use out of it in the 2 years I've had it. I've just had to do a couple little things to it. I had to replace this rubber grip for the dump handle, which oddly enough turns out to be the same grip that's used on the power control levers for a 2-cylinder tractor, so I thought that was kind of neat. I had to replace that rubber grip since the old one was rotted off. And I also had to replace both tires since the old tires were pretty dry rotted and didn't hold air. So I replaced them with some new Carlisle 5-rib tires. Nothing fancy. Tried to stick to the original design, or the original tire pattern as best as I could. I also put tubes in them just for good measure. And for a short time I owned a tow-behind EasyVac system with the wooden canvas assembly, and I actually had that mounted up on this cart, but I decided not to use the EasyVac system and I sold it, so I had to take the canvas assembly off. My uncle has one of those on his 80 cart that he bought new in 1981. That cart's still getting used every week for the leaf collection, and it's seen better days, but he's still getting his money's worth out of it. But anyway, so this is the first 80 cart, and in this cart you'll see my my custom built 43 hydraulic blade. So this blade was actually kind of a Frankenstein. I took parts from several different blades that I had. Back in the 70s and 80s, when these older John Deeres were big sellers, it wasn't uncommon for John Deere dealerships to take the parts from a 54 blade and a 43 blade and put them together, because the Model 54 blades, as you can probably tell here, the mold board on these blades, being 54 inches wide, was a little too wide for a lot of sidewalks, and a lot of residential customers wanted a blade that could fit down their sidewalks easily. So John Deere dealers would swap the 42-inch mold board from the Model 43 blade that was sold for the 110, 112, and 200 series tractors. They would swap the mold board onto a hydraulic mount for a 300 series tractor, or say a 120 or 140. So there's actually, it's not too uncommon to see these. They were very popular back then. So I had a 43 blade that I bought about 3 years ago to use on my 210, and I used it a couple times, made a little money with it in the winter. But with the 210 not being or not having hydraulic down pressure, it made it kind of useless for breaking ice, and I was just using it for pushing little things around the yard here and there. I ended up buying a 54 blade that you see here in January of last year, so about a year and a half ago, and I had intended to use this on the 316 Kohler when I had it, but needless to say, a year and a half later, I actually have not used it. The previous owner repainted the mold board, and it just got a little scratched up from me moving it around the garage here, as you can see. But this blade has not seen a whole lot of use. The previous owner also replaced the wear bar, the scraper bar on the bottom, with all new mounting hardware. And he said the guy that he bought the blade from was very particular about maintenance, and apparently the guy had put very few hours on it. So this blade really hasn't seen a whole lot of use, and I bought it off Craigslist for a pretty good deal a year and a half ago. It's a four-way blade, which means it has two hydraulic cylinders, one for the lift and then one to angle it left and right. Like I said, I bought this blade to use on the 316 Kohler when I had it, but we haven't had any snowfall here in about 2 years, so I haven't even used this blade at all. And then earlier this year, back in February, when I bought the 318, I got another 54 four-way blade with it. But I didn't need two 54 blades, and I also noticed that the last time I used the 43 blade on the 210, I noticed that the mounting frame was actually bent. Somehow, at some point in the past, the frame, the uprights got bent, so the blade would not sit level on the ground when you were plowing snow, and there would always be strips of snow or ice left behind. Since I had a 54 blade, I figured rather than spending the time and effort to straighten it back out and get it cutting smoothly again, I would just take it apart. And like I said, when I got the 318, I ended up with another 54 four-way hydraulic blade. And my friend Jimmy needed a good mold board for his 54 blade, so I gave him the mold board, and I kept the four-way mount, as you can see here. And I scrapped the bent-up mount from the original 43 blade, and then I just swapped over the mold board. And I've actually been using this blade here quite a bit. I've been getting a lot of good use out of it because it's, it's just the right size for fitting down the sidewalk and just doing little odd jobs around the yard. About 3 years ago, I replaced the squeegee bar along the bottom with new mounting hardware, and I also replaced the skid shoes since the old ones were worn out. The mold board does have a bit of rust, as you can see. It's just surface rust, though. It's nothing major. And like I said, it's a very, very handy little blade to have. It's much easier to move around and store compared to the 54 blade. So I'm going to actually use this one on the 318 from now on. And as a result, I've decided to sell this 54 blade. I've got it listed for sale right now. I know it's really not the right time to try and sell one of these blades, but if anybody's interested, let me know. Moving on, next thing you'll see here is a custom suitcase weight bracket that I kind of rigged up to fit the 210. These can actually be bought pretty reasonably on eBay. I bought this off of a local guy who was getting out of collecting the 200 series tractors, but I didn't like the way that it mounted to the back of the tractor. This kit you buy on eBay has a removable weight box assembly. The weight box itself, where the suitcase weights hang, can be removed from the frame mounts, the two-piece frame mounts there. And it can be used. It's designed to be used on the front or the back of the tractor. I didn't need the front part because I have the custom weight bracket on the front of the 210 already, so I got rid of the brackets for the front. And like I said, I wasn't a fan of the way that it attached to the rear of the tractor with bolts, so I took it up to the shop one day and we custom made these spring mounting pins. I used the original spring pins from, I believe these are actually from a sleeve hitch. They're the same pins that are used to mount a sleeve hitch. So I used the pins, the springs, and then the roll pins, and then I just used a couple of hardware store clevis pins for the lower ones. And I mounted it up on the back of the 210, and it fits perfectly. And it's much easier having the spring-loaded pins instead of having to reach up in there with a couple wrenches to take the weight bracket off. My thinking with building this was to have an easily removable or attachable weight bracket for the garden tractor pulls, so I could just hang suitcase weights on it or take the bracket off if I needed. Moving to the back here, you'll see my other 80 cart here. I just picked this one up within the past couple months from a collector in Pennsylvania. This is a 1975 80 cart, and it's actually in a little bit better condition than the 78 in front of me here. I got a pretty good deal on this one. I actually traded the old 46-inch deck for my 210 and a little cash for it, and he dropped it off at my friend Jimmy's house, and then I picked it up from Jimmy. This cart has good tires on it, and it came with a set of the chrome John Deere hubcaps too, which are pretty cool. They make a nice little touch. I've never owned a set of those hubcaps before, but I think they look pretty good. So both of these carts have been getting equal use, but I wanted to buy a second 80 cart strictly to use for attachment storage, just to keep everything off the floor here, because these attachments take up a lot of floor space. So that's the other 80 cart. And then this particular cart is used to store all of my plows. So I'll come over here. I'll just show you the plows real quick. This is the very first plow that I ever bought, an old Brinly plow that was restored some years back. I bought this off a local guy who wanted to get rid of it. It's got a newer paint job, as you can see. It has a reproduction serial number tag that dates it as a 64, but it's not the correct tag. This style of beam, the curved beam, didn't come into play until sometime in the late 60s or early 70s, so it's actually a later one. This is the one that I took to PA Plow Day the very first time, and this is the one that I've gotten the most use out of, if you can't tell by the very, very worn share. Luckily, you can still buy plowshares for these through Brinly, so I think before the next plow day, I'm going to finally bite the bullet and get a new share for it. This plow here, this sleeve hitch plow, is my newest, or one of my newer additions, I should say. This is a nice original. This one's dated 66, so it's one of the very first ones to use the curved beam instead of the old style straight beam, which I'll show you in a minute. I bought this off of my buddy Carl, who's a big collector, and I just wanted a nice original condition one. I have the restored one, and now I have a nice original, and this has a good share. You can't really tell from here, but this one still has a decent share. Here you'll see my 3-point plow that I talked about in my last video on the 782. I bought this off of Fulton Mower Salvage back in the fall. I got a pretty good deal on it, and it's all complete. It's got the Coulter wheel, it's got the gauge wheel, as you can see, and it has a good share as well. I haven't had a chance to use this one yet because I haven't owned a tractor with a 3-point hitch. Now I finally have the 3-point mounted on the 782, so I'll have to one of these days I'll have to test it out, see how I like it. It needs some adjusting though, because this these two U-bolts are actually supposed to, I think they're supposed to be centered here around the center post there for the 3-point adapter. So somebody must have been messing with the adjustment and they screwed it all up. So at some point I have to take that A-frame off and readjust it. Then over here I'll show you my newest addition to the plow collection, which actually happens to be the oldest plow that I own. This is an early 60s Brinly sleeve hitch plow. You can tell it's an early one because it has the older straight beam instead of the curve like I showed you before. This part of the beam here is straight across, and it uses the single hitch pin hole on the sleeve hitch yoke. And I just picked this one up last week, actually. Actually, all my tractors are technically too large for this plow because this one happens to have an 8-inch share, which is fairly uncommon. The 8-inch Brinly sleeve hitch plows are not easy to find, and then to find an earlier one like this with the straight beam makes it even more unique. So, I mean, they're not rare per se, but they're definitely not common, and I got this one pretty cheap. It's a little rough, as you can see. There's really hardly any original paint left on it. It's spent a lot of time outside, but it's all complete. It does have the Coulter wheel, and the wheel does turn. And the share is okay. I mean, it's got some wear to it, but the rest of the plow is in decent shape. The adjusting rod here needs to be loosened up as well. Nothing a little PB blaster and heat can't fix. I just wanted to pick this up because you don't see many of these 8-inch plows, let alone one with a straight beam. And this would look really good behind an early round fender tractor, like an early 60s round fender. I don't know the year on this plow because most of the decals are gone. You can still see the remnants of the old style Brinly decal, but the serial number badge is gone, so I don't know the year. But I actually have this one listed for sale, so if anybody's interested, let me know. At the same time that I picked this plow up, I also picked up this set of Brinly tandem discs. These are the early style discs, presumably from around the same time period as the early style plow, because the main piece of angle here, like for the main frame, is straight across. The later ones had a slight bend in them. And there's two tandems here, as you can see. There's the front and the back. They're meant to be hooked together and pulled together behind a tractor. When you hook the two tandems together, they're not. It basically eliminates the need for the sleeve hitch yoke, which is on that side there. They're just meant to be dragged behind. I had a single gang Brinly disc a couple years ago. I used it a little bit and then sold it. Like I said, I got a good deal on all of these attachments here together as a package, so I figured I'd just pick them all up. It's kind of cool to have a complete gang. This one's in slightly worse shape than the plow. Again, as you can tell, it's been sitting outside for quite some time. This disc is completely rusted and broken off at the mount where it mounts to the shaft here, and all of the discs on this gang are seized up, so they're going to need a little bit of lube and probably some heat to get loosened up again. But the back set here is still free. Looks like it's been used a little more recently than the other set. So I actually have these sold to a local friend of mine, so I'm going to be delivering them to him in the next couple days. Back here I got my stack of wheel weights. I have 2 sets of John Deere 50-pound wheel weights here. I used to have 4 total sets, but I just sold 1 set a couple weeks ago, and I realized I really didn't have any use for 4 weights since I don't usually stack more than 1 or 2 sets at a time. Eventually one of these sets of weights will be going on the 318. My third set is currently mounted on the 210. Here's my stack of tires. As you can see, these are the old True Powers off of the 210. These are actually sold. Those are going to Maryland. Here's the original Goodyear turf tires from the 318. These are in very good shape. They're not dry rotted or cracked or anything, and they hold air pretty well. I'm a fan of these older Goodyear soft track tires because they take a long time to wear. They always bite really well, and these in particular are in excellent shape. So I was fortunate enough to be able to get these with the 318. The 318 came with a brand new set of True Power tires on it, but they were on their own separate set of wheels. So I'll definitely be keeping these around because these are a pretty desirable turf tire. Down there, as you can see, I have my old Carlisle all-trail heavy-duty all-purpose tires. They're kind of like an ATV tire. These were the first new set of tires I put on the 210 about 6 years ago. I have them loaded with 7 gallons each of rim guard, which is basically a beet juice byproduct. I got it through my John Deere dealer. It wasn't cheap, but it's supposed to be a better alternative to antifreeze or windshield washer fluid like a lot of other guys use. And it's much heavier too, so it gives you a lot more weight. You get more bang for your buck. I also have a set of tire chains mounted on these, so these have become my dedicated snow tires. So, God willing, we get some more snow. I mean, it's been a couple years, but if we get any more snow, I'll be using these tires on the 318 to plow. Like I said a few minutes ago, my uncle's John Deere 80 cart that he bought brand new has seen better days. He's definitely gotten his money's worth out of it, and it's been used pretty much every week in the summer since it was bought new 40 years ago. Hopefully this gives you an idea of the condition and the wear that it's seen over the years. Just recently he decided to finally get rid of the old tailgate, so I actually kept it. I think I might just hang it up on the wall in the garage here as like a keepsake. The tailgates for these 80 carts are pretty valuable. They kind of make up most of the value of the cart. But, I mean, this one is pretty much junk. You can see he burned a hole with the torch to get the old latch off. And he actually custom made his own tailgate for it to use with the EasyVac system. It folds down from the top instead of from the bottom, which is much easier and more convenient for dumping out the grass when you have to dump the load. So he was going to get rid of this tailgate here. I figured I would keep it and try and find a good use for it. So, I don't know. I'll probably hang it up on the wall or something, but just thought you guys might want to see that. So now we'll head over into the shed and I'll show you some of the attachments I got hiding back here. First up, we got the old 44-inch lawn sweeper. We got this brand new with the X570. The dealer gave us a good deal on them as a package. My dad likes using a lawn sweeper to pick up the grass clippings, but honestly, this sweeper doesn't even get used much anymore. We really just use it for picking up leaves in the fall and for picking up heavy wet grass. But like I said, it really doesn't see too much use anymore. The last time I used it was in the beginning of the season to pick up all the dead thatch that I pulled up with the 318. This is actually an Agri-Fab sweeper. It's the same sweeper made by Agri-Fab. It's just painted in John Deere colors. And it's when it works pretty good, but it's just, the concept of a lawn sweeper, in my opinion, is they're made kind of cheap and flimsy. And in the 13 years we've lived here, we've gone through 3 of them because we just wear them out. Or we load them too heavy, either one. But this one's served us pretty well. I just, I don't use it too much anymore, especially now that I mulch the grass all the time. This is another one that I recently picked up, tow behind Dethatcher. If you saw the video of me dethatching with the 318 a couple months back, you'll probably understand why I picked this up. At the time I had borrowed my uncle's front-mounted dethatcher, but the mount for the tractor frame was bent, and it just kept falling off the tractor whenever I went around to turn, and I got pretty pissed off with it, so I just decided to pick up a tow-behind one. I bought this in a package deal from a guy right around the corner on Facebook Marketplace. He was selling this along with a tow-behind sprayer and a drop seeder spike aerator. So I didn't have a use for the sprayer, so I bought the Dethatcher and the spike aerator, and I fixed up the spike aerator and sold it because it just didn't work the way I wanted it to. But I kept the Dethatcher. I had to replace 2 sections of tines on the corners actually. This set right here, it's like a pair of torsion springs. I had to replace this set, and I had to replace this set over here. So it was too late in the season for me to use it once I got it all fixed up, but I'll probably be using it later this fall or next spring. So I'm glad to finally have a tow behind Dethatcher. It'll be much more convenient that way. Over here we have a tow behind John Deere broadcast spreader. These were actually made by Brinly. It's got the poly hopper to it. It's not the metal one. I prefer to have a metal one. Someday I would like to find one of the older John Deere metal tow behind broadcast spreaders. I know a couple guys running them. I think they're pretty cool, and they're a bit of a collector's item, so someday I'll pick one up. But this one we picked up actually when we bought our LA 150, which was our very first lawn tractor that we ever had when we moved here. So that would have been back in 2007, 2008. And shortly after we bought this, my grandfather bought his own tow behind broadcast spreader, which I actually just recently sold since we didn't need 2 of them. But he bought his own spreader, and then he did the fertilizing for our lawns for many, many years. So this actually just sat. It sat in the shed for a couple years, and then it sat out behind the shed for a couple more years. And I just recently sold my grandfather's broadcast spreader, and I decided to put this one back into service. So I actually used this one to fertilize our lawn this year, and it still works pretty good. All right, I'm starting to run out of daylight, so I'm going to try and make this a little quick. Lastly, I have a couple attachments that have actually, they have some sentimental value to me. I actually just recently rescued these from the fence row over at my uncle's place. These are a couple of single row planters that my grandfather used on the farm many years ago. First, we have a pair of John Deere Model 70 Flexiplanters. He used to plant tomato seeds, and I think he also planted beans and peas with these. So after he sold the farm and sold all the equipment, my uncle took these up to his place and used them in his garden for a couple years and kept them fully functional. And then just recently he put them in the back fence row, and I figured rather than see them, rot away, I would save them. So I got them up here and got them inside. I mean, God knows how long it's been since they were inside. They're in pretty good shape overall. They've got some surface rust, and the bins have some dents and holes in them, but nothing that we couldn't, straighten back out and weld up. As far as I know, they still have the original bean plates in them. I think they're down in the bottom there. I have to check, but I was surprised to find out that John Deere still sells most of the parts for these. These were made in the late 50s and early 60s, I think 1958 to 1965 or so. Then they replaced them with the Model 71, which used a slightly different chain drive setup, I believe. From what I've heard, the Model 70s, like the ones here, are the more desirable of the two. Like I said, my grandfather used to plant peas, beans, and tomatoes, and probably a couple other things too. I know they tried planting soybeans and wheat one year. Unfortunately, I don't have the toolbar that he used to mount these on the tractor. He used to pull these behind the John Deere 50, which was one of the only tractors that had the 3-point hitch. And at some point, I guess the toolbar got lost or sold, so I don't have that anymore. But eventually, I would like to set these up to pull behind one of my garden tractors because they're just the right size for a garden tractor. And I actually know a guy out in the Midwest who manufactures custom toolbars to mount these to your Category 0 3-point hitch. So at some point I'm going to have him make me one of those toolbars, and I'll pull it behind one of the tractors with a 3-point. And then lastly, back here in the corner is another one of my grandfather's planters. This is an old Planet Junior made by the Cole Planter Company, which is actually still in business today. They're based out of Georgia, I believe, and they still do produce these very ancient-looking planters. I think he planted tomatoes with this one in particular. As far as I know, my uncle still has 1 or 2 of these that he uses in his garden, so we had a handful of them. It's all there. I mean, I have a couple different plates for this one. I have them stored away, but it's rusty, as you can see. It's got surface rust, but it's all complete, like I said. Everything works on it, and it shouldn't take too much to get this freed up and working again. If I want to put in a garden, I think it would be cool to pull these behind the garden tractors. But all these planters are complete, and I figured rather than let them sit in the fence row and rot away or try and sell them, I would keep them and fix them up, since they have some sentimental value to us. So eventually, these will become the next projects on my radar. So that basically sums up my attachment collection for at least for right now. I mean, like I said before, my collection is always changing. You know, new attachments are coming and going, and new tractors are always coming and going. But right now, I've kind of settled down, put a cap on the collection, and at this point, I'm only trying to pick up the attachments that I know I'm going to use in the future. There's a couple that I'm still looking for. One of these days, I'd like to find an early style straight beam Brinly 3-point plow, the very early style. I know where there's one located, so I think I might go try and get it. I'd also like to find a Brinly planter, a Brinly sleeve hitch blade or 3-point blade or box blade, and someday I'd even like to find a sickle bar mower. Hay-Band made a 3-point hitch mounted 2000 RPM sickle bar mower to hook up to like a 318 or one of these later ones, and a friend of mine had one of those. He just sold it. I don't really have a use for a sickle bar right now, but someday I would like to pick one of those up as well. So like I said, the collection's always changing. You never know what might roll in here, but it's cool to say that I own, you know, so many of these neat old attachments. And you know, a lot of these were made back in the era when if you bought a small tractor like this, you bought it to use as a small tractor, not just as a lawnmower. So it wasn't uncommon to see people buy a tractor just for pulling, you know, sleeve hitch or 3-point hitch attachments back in the day. And what's even cooler is that companies like Brinly are still in business today. Brinly and Agri-Fab and Ohio Steel, a lot of the companies that were around back then are still around today. And you can still get parts for a lot of these plows, which is pretty nice. If you remember, I actually had a much newer Brinly sleeve hitch plow that I got with the 316. I sold that a couple months ago. But it just goes to show you that it's nice to still have the parts support for these old, you know, attachments and things like that. So I'm always looking to add to the collection. But anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a little overview of my attachment collection as of summer 2020. And let's see what I can pick up next. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please comment, rate, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.